Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in to talk about Machi Season 2, Episode 2. Woo! For anyone that's wondering, the anime covered up to like around page 130 roughly, so it's roughly going at a pace of 70 pages per episode. The pacing is still really good, but we'll talk about that I guess more towards the end of the video since that's the proper place to talk about it. Anyway, let's just get into the regular review. So we're doing top moments followed by my general impression. So top moment number 1. Dix and his group. It was really good to see these characters. They came in with really heavy expositionary dialogue. So they did tell us the immediate motivation. So they are motivated by greed. Not a big issue. We also saw that they had monsters captured, and it seems like they know what's up with these monsters in general. It was also interesting because this was a scene that was used to show how a god could be useful in these kind of nefarious activities. What with the I guess lie detection ability, the fact that people can't lie to a god. So that was really good. Any other things to say about that moment? In this moment, they mentioned that Wine would be very valuable. It is just interesting. So this is something I mentioned in the last episode, the whole thing about Wine's price. So he called her rare, but it's really funny that they are not talking about the dragon's tear, the gem that's on her forehead. That's what's really valuable about her as well. So it's just really funny that they're just in general saying that she's valuable, and they're like overlooking that one little detail, which is really just neat when it comes down to these monsters. Wine is a dragon girl kind of thing, so it's just always kind of interesting that we don't really fully get that last little bit of detail. It wouldn't be that hard to add it in, just say something about the dragon's tear or whatever it's called. I think that'll be totally fine. My second top moment was Aisha's return. So as a novel reader, it was really cool to see the author bring back this particular character. I didn't think she was going to be coming back, but then you had the short story volume that was right before this volume, and you had her here, and it was really a unique composition in the group. I really like that. It was a regular type of dynamic because you had Ryu there and you had Aisha there, so it was cool to see it. It was cool to see that Aisha is still very much pulling for Belle and Haruhime, although she still has her Amazon sensibilities. Third top moment was the battle and Belle's hesitation during the battle. So this is important because this is just showing you where Belle's head is at. What is meant to be conveyed in that scene is that Belle's thinking, oh dear God, what if these monsters are like Wine? What if these people have dreams and hopes like Wine? Am I about to squish them? Am I about to kill them? So this just opens up that whole issue. So in the novel, this would have had more time devoted to it because of Belle's predisposition to monologue for long periods of time. So Belle is very much a very emotional kid. So this was much more drawn out in the novel. I just pictured his struggle more. But the anime did a good enough job when you had Welf coming up to him and reprimanding him like, hey man, you can't be thinking about this right now. That was a good moment. And mind you, the situation is much more nuanced, and unfortunately, I don't think the anime did a good job in the first episode of showing in what way it was nuanced. But we'll talk about that in the next moment. Belle and Welf run into a monster, a harpy. At least I think it was a harpy. Might be a siren. I don't know. The adventurers called out a bunch of monsters later, but she has a feather, so I think it's a harpy, but it might be a siren because depends on it depends on the mythology and what they're applying as a siren. Anyway, this was just good because it told us a bit more about the plight of the monsters that can talk, and it specifically also talked about them wanting to be in the sun. So when it comes to the sun, I just want you to keep in mind that the sun itself is a significant metaphor for the rest of the arc. So just keep in mind whenever you see them talking about the sun, I want you to keep an eye on that because that is one of the prominent metaphors that the author was trying to paint. It is one of those bigger ideas that ultimately symbolizes a hope for the future, and that's not a spoiler to say. I'm just telling you something because the anime might not cover the symbology of the sun and the meaning of the sun towards the monsters that can talk. Now this person also says something else here, which is glossing over what they said about the dungeon. The monster spoke negatively about the dungeon, though the dungeon is its mother. So what I want to add here is that even if you're a talking monster, you will be attacked by the monsters of the dungeon. You saw a little bit of this in the first episode with Wine running. She was running away from other monsters, and you saw that a monster was willing to attack her. So what's going on here specifically, and again, not a spoiler because the anime is just not doing a good job in showing you guys these things, because this would have been like the first moments of the first episode. Dungeon monsters will see the talking monsters just as badly as adventurers, and that's why the monsters in general have a plight about going out into the sun and why they talk negatively about the environment in the dungeon. It is legitimately a very terrifying place for the talking monsters. Then we have Bell running into Ikelos for my next top moment, and Hermes coming to save him. So this was just a really cool moment, and we have a name drop of a Dark Familia alliance, Evil Us, and I really think they should really just put an R between Evil and Us because I think that would be even more funny. Honestly, think about what it means to have a family name or an alliance name that literally has evil and us in the same word. It's really on the nose, really on the nose. I do wonder how the translation worked for that, because if it was Japanese and then the name of the family was actually just flat out Evil Us in English, you can kind of see it differently, because that'd be the same as like some random English writer using a Japanese word to convey a darker meaning, right? It looks a little bit goofier maybe for English speakers because it's a language, but maybe it was a little bit more mysterious in the original work. But I just found it really funny. Anyway, in this moment, it was just really interesting to see Hermes and Ikelos having this talk. It was interesting to see a little bit of nuance. And here, Hermes made a point about the gods that want amusement, that they hunger for amusement, and just how much trouble they are. So that was a really interesting point, considering it was Hermes saying it. It'll be interesting to see how Hermes interacts with this plot going forward, because we know he has a pretty big stake in it between Bell and the contract. My next top moment was, of course, Weene saving the little girl. And the reason it was a really brutal moment that served to show the immediate difficulties with monsters suddenly showing up in the population. So when it comes to the citizens of Horario, I believe it's called, I really wouldn't expect them to be kind to monsters. They live by the virtue of monsters. Like, the reason Horario is so good is because the dungeon is there and because monsters leave crystals and all that. So they live off of the monsters that they slaughter, but at the same time there's also monsters that have a history of slaughtering them. So when you consider the history of the Danmachi world, it makes sense that the people in general are not very favorable towards monsters. So seeing that moment there where the people are all crowding around the monster, it makes sense. In all honesty, like, these people have been screwed over by monsters more often than not. The dungeon is a very dangerous place. It's just one of those things that happens, right? But it was still a really brutal moment because no one was able to see the fact that Weene saved the little girl. And my final top moment was, of course, Weene crying when Bell couldn't give her the answer she wanted to hear. This was a pretty brutal moment even in a novel because, again, Bell was taking you through the exact thought process. Like, Bell, the poor kid, after going through all that he had went through, he sees this girl, he sees her claws, he sees her giant wing, and he's like, shit, like, I can't hide you very well. I know how bad of a situation this is. So that is a brutal moment in the novel because there wasn't any easy way forward, and it was good that the novel writer was willing to acknowledge that there wasn't an easy way forward, just because when you look back at it too, heroes and stories, what do heroes do? They kill monsters. Heroes are fundamentally opposed to monsters because you lived in a society where monsters were not capable of sentience in the way that Weene was. So when you have that entire history forming in the background, it's hard to go against the wheels or the ball that's already been dropped down the mountain by history. So in terms of the episode overall, I think it was a really great episode. I think I felt a lot better for the episode this time around, mostly because the episode was action-packed. And so even in the novel, when you had such a sequence where you had so many things happening, Belle doesn't get that much time to monologue. At these points in time, I think the novel switches to third person, which does a slightly better job of not getting stuck in Belle's head for too long. Although, again, Belle's inner monologues are really important for the novel because that's how the novel builds suspense and really makes you understand some things. So in terms of that in general, there weren't that many places where you're lacking on Belle's thought process. Like the real big moments that you need to understand Belle's thought process, the anime did a good job in showing them, and those were the moments where Belle was showing hesitation against the Harpies, and that was the moment where Belle just couldn't say something to Weene to make her feel better. When it comes to the to the Lamia issue, when it comes to the Lamia issue when they're with Aisha and Ryu, I do want to say that this is like the difference between a bad adaptation and a good adaptation. That scene didn't last all that long, right? the anime could have skipped that scene, and in that case, well, what do you get? You miss the whole point. You miss the fact that Belle has these struggles towards random monsters. Really, in the context of you want to make an anime adaptation, but you don't want to you want to like cut out the stupid stuff or the not useful stuff. Showing Belle having hesitation towards regular monsters is not a factor that actually makes that much of a narrative difference going forward. The reason being is because Belle is squarely focused on the talking monster very quickly. And also with the narrative from the book at the beginning, readers would already have known that regular talking monsters are a problem. What it does for the book is that it just creates a more nuanced situation and puts Belle in a more believable spot, because as a character in the world, he wouldn't know to make the distinction between regular monsters and talking monsters. So that detail exists only to make Belle a better character. The anime could have dropped that particular detail because of what it ultimately leads into. The novel showing that detail is just to show you that Belle is thinking and interacting with the material that he's being presented with. So this is why ultimately I think, better adaptation. This is a good adaptation, or that's a sign of a good adaptation, because when you're adapting the details that help flesh out a character a little bit more, that's pretty worthwhile, even though it may not have an immediate payoff like all the other details. Now, another interesting person within the episode was, of course, Lily, because she is the one that instigates the last bit of the episode. In her talking to Hestia, she essentially provokes Weene into going out because Weene doesn't know any better. So this is just really important because it's ultimately Lily that comes in to save her. And it's just, Lily is coming into this in a position of wanting to protect her family and wanting to make the hard choices. And again, we're seeing in real time the bias against monsters at play. And Lily is legitimately correct in that this is a really hard situation for everyone involved. And that's why when you have it at the end, you have Orenos and Fels talking at the end, or Fels mostly making an observation. Everyone knows this is a tough moment. Everyone knows that this is a tough problem. So Lily being reasonable and being more cynical is ultimately valuable, because again, what we want to take away from this is just how hard of how ingrained the bias against monsters is, rightfully so. So in the novel, there is a possibility to be upset with Lily, but from her perspective, especially as someone who's been screwed over a lot by the way the world works, her worries were justified. And the bigger thing is that at the end of the day, Lily is still willing to help her family, even if she thinks they're making the wrong choice. That is the redeeming factor towards Lily here. It is unfortunate that Lily has to be the villain, but I think the author really excels with writing Lily as the villain when it comes to these particular type of problems. And even when I say villain, it's really just more of like the person who's being reasonable and is just a little bit cynical. So overall, for this episode, I think really good. I think really solid. I think we're getting 4 episodes for this. What's the volume? I think we're getting 4 episodes for volume 9. Can you see it? Yeah. So this should be over by episode 4, with episode 4 maybe having a little bit of volume 10 in it. And the reason that I say that is just because there's 260 pages roughly. We're at 130. So when you look at that, 130 times 2, 260. So if we're doing 70 pages roughly per episode, I feel like it'd be reasonable to say this is going to be 4 episodes, which is really good, because if this is 4 episodes, that means volume 10 is going to be probably 4 episodes, and that also means that volume 11 is going to be 4 episodes, and those 3 volumes together, I think it's great. Those 3 volumes together need to be animated together because they follow the subject matter. It was actually really cool. The author was talking about how, is it a he or a she? Well, Omori was talking about how there's 2 of these volumes that are one story split into 2, and they were just talking about how difficult it was to write this particular setup in novel form. So it's just really neat. It's really neat. It's nice to have the afterwards at the back of the volumes, and I am very happy that we're going to get 9, 10, and 11 in the same season. Now, I would love to have Volume 12 also animated, but I believe Volume 12 evolves the situation a little bit more. So, well, like you really can't do all too much about that. Anyway, yeah, here we go. This was Dan Machi, episode 2. I think really solid episode. I think really nicely adapted. I love the episode. Let me know what you guys thought down below. And until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.